Tim. Welcome to Watchbox and thanks for logging on. This is Watches Tonight. This evening, I lavish love on my favorite Quartz watches, chat live, and share your viewer wrist shots. Guys, check out the redesigned homepage of thewatchbox.com. That's where we are. We're at the Watchbox. All the watches are in this box. And you can find them here on our website. 3,000 vintage and pre-owned watches updated multiple times per day. If you checked in the morning, there are already more watches now. So open it up, keep me streaming, and check out thewatchbox.com. Who's in the box? Well, the chat box, it's Edward Ledden of Sweden, Matt Foster, Watchusiast from Dubai, Jim Millett, Richard Combs, our friend from South Florida, your wrist chats in the show, Richard, John N., Enrique Casiano, Mark S. from Brooklyn, Evan Goff, Karate Chap from London, Wrist Ed, Scott Wexlin, our local boy. I'm doing well, Scott. Thank you very much. All right, so here's the thing. This is not news, but in an era of price and priority distortions, shameless money plays have become routine in watches. And yes, that's one of them. And while that might offend polite company in, say, Singapore or London, I'm from New York and we have higher standards because in New York, we are still the sellout superpower of the world. And by that, I mean New York City. As Exhibit A, I give you Disney on Broadway. Conceived in 1994 to ensure that tourists spend their vacation money on the same stupid crap that their kids have already made them watch 40 times, then on VHS, today it's streaming. But it's the same basic idea. Pay for something you've already seen. I spend more time preparing this show than the average Disney on Broadway producer spends on the entire production, because he's already got the script, the roles, the music, the whole story pre-written. He just rents the movie and he knows what he's going to do. Job done. And here's the thing, it's gone mainstream. The establishment is in on it because the Playbill scene is in on the game. Oh right, that's Frozen on the cover of Playbill. Art is dead. And you've got the actors who want to secure a role that frankly is probably safer than a Volvo, because this thing is going to run for years. And you've got at least one critic willing to sell his human soul in order to be quoted on the marquee for Aladdin on Broadway. It's enough to make AP's annual Royal Oak Dial Color Hustle look downright fresh. Guys, let's check out yours on mine viewer wrist shots number 1. Danny H. of Thailand and his Patek Philippe 5212, a Calatrava weekly calendar. Enjoy a weekend drive. Nothing I like more than a great drive with a great car and a great watch. But we're not alone, as O&O chooses to accessorize his weekly calendar with an Optimo fedora. Indiana Jones would approve. Tobias L. wows with his Parmigiani Fleurier Kalpa HL Hebdomadaire, because you wind it weekly, while riding his scooter. Stay careful, stay safe. Joe D. and his VC Overseas Dual Time Everest. We don't see much of this one, but I'm glad it's here. They are at work at his office in Las Vegas. And David E. and his E63 AMG S ride with the FP Journe Line Sport Chronograph Monopoussoir Rattrapant. Guys, send your wrist shots to Monday Mailbag at thewatchbox.com to see your machines on this screen. Who's joining us? We got a lot of friends. Boo Sir. We've got Mark S. Tim Hot Takes Rule. Someday we're going to take all those opening sections and we're just going to make one joke reel. It's going to be like the April Fool's release. We take all the jokes from all the shows and just hitch them all together. 30 minutes of nothing but kidding. And then we've got a Mick in Florida, Jacob O. We've got Mikhail Z joining from Switzerland, Dr. TikTok, Thomas Burnett, Borjator, Madrid is in the house, Burning Mr. B from Holland, and Time Hill with Fordson 999 getting up early with us in Hong Kong, and Joe Steve saying not working today so I can join in, hello, and Mr. Ninja, I see you joining in from Oregon, all our best friends in one place. My favorite Quartz watches, I'm going to introduce them, I'm going to make my case, and if you don't love, you don't buy. But open your mind, because Quartz might just be that unexpected kick that re-energizes your love for watches after burnout on the Steel Sports Watch splurge of 2021. So each watch collector pretty much knows the drill. Early in our collecting experience, the internet teaches us that Rolex is not the ultimate ultimate watch, that mechanical watches are actually not that accurate compared to electronic timekeepers. Speaking of which, we also learned that quartz is crap, and that's how it's always phrased to us. Quartz is for newbies, fashionistas, and it's the prize you get in a McDonald's Happy Meal. Well, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. At least, well, the first two lessons, while oversimplified, do have some merit, but the third is, well, crap. Luxury watches, and luxury quartz watches specifically, can be incredibly capable, indisputably luxury, and yes, designed to last a lifetime. Not just the lifetime of the person who owns the watch, but of the watch itself. They should never be confused with disposable consumer articles like smartwatches, which are, frankly, more like digital devices. Blackberries, tablets, computers, and smartwatches are all separate from luxury quartz. Here are my favorite luxury quartz watches and a few reasons why you should love them too, starting with the 2022 Grand Seiko Evolution 9 collection and the new SLGA009. Fast forward by reversing. Rewind, be kind, and look at 1977, which is when this story starts. Yoshikazu Akahane, an engineer with Suisakosha, had the idea for a watch that would use the energy from a mainspring and a mechanical drivetrain, but with a quartz timing organ. So this took a long time to come to fruition, as it wasn't until 1999 and many patents and many engineers later that Seiko was ready to bring out manual wind spring drive. Now, we didn't get automatic spring drive until 2005, so this was a true long-term project. Ulysses did no better. And I should mention that 2022 brings broader availability of Grand Seiko's latest spring drive caliber 9RA5 in the form of a new white birch model. Last year we got the white birch SLGA005, that was mechanical, that was the new 9S caliber. Well, now we get the 5-day spring drive. This is the 40mm SLGA009. It's stainless steel, it's beautifully sized, it's wonderfully slim at only 11.8mm thick, fully competitive with rivals from Rolex such as the Datejust 41, and worlds better than the thick Aquaterras from Omega, which are great watches, but chunky chunks. Now here's the thing. The 5-day power reserve caliber 9RA2 is everything the A5 is, but it features a case back power reserve, meaning one of the most controversial elements of the older spring drive calibers has been removed from the dial. Now you get the complication, but you don't get the visual scar of the asymmetry it breeds on the watch face. I should also say it is an extensively mechanical movement. For those of you who may misunderstand spring drive, it is mechanical. There are no batteries, there are no capacitors powering it, there are no stepper motors. It is all spring energy converted into potential energy and induced electrical current. As a result, we have a magic lever winding system that's basically indistinguishable from what you find in a standard automatic mechanical Grand Seiko movement. And I should say that this system works by generating induced electrical current, which is to say it wakes up a quartz oscillator that regulates the governing wheel, but the governing wheel is macro and mechanical, and it is that wheel, not a motor, that governs the hands, which is why you get the continuously smooth, stepless sweep of spring drive on the dial, which remains a unique aesthetic even all these years later. Now, I should say, in addition to 120 hours of power reserve by now twin mainspring barrels, Grand Seiko includes precision. We have a new pre-aged quartz crystal that allows the watch to run no worse than plus or minus 10 seconds per month. So old spring drive in general was plus or minus 15 seconds per month. Now it is 10. And remember, a mechanical chronometer can gain 6, lose 4 seconds per 24 hours. This is 10 seconds a month. And from what I understand, in practice, it's going to be less. I should also say that 100 meters water resistant, 40 millimeters in steel, less than 12 millimeters thick, and at $8,600, it is priced right. It is absolutely competitive with Rolex and the Datejust 41, and frankly, it's more interesting. Yes, it's a little bit more expensive, but it's just a more interesting watch on every level. Technical, aesthetic, and I should also mention, exclusivity. Because while this may be an allocated, well, I should say, while the Datejust may be an allocated watch at Rolex dealers, they're going to make a lot more of them than the SLGA009, which will remain comparatively a less common timepiece. It seems to have everything going for it, and you need to remember, those dials are handmade, the cases are hand-finished. Rolex watches have exactly one manual step in their assembly, and that is placing the movement into the case. Everything else is automated. This is a handmade watch for under 10 grand. Let's see what you guys are saying right here. Richard Combs is in the box speaking to LB, and LB, I can't see what you said, but I would respond to it if I could find it. We've got Mark S saying, aren't power reserves kind of pointless on an automatic? I find sometimes they're useful. You know, if you've got a couple of watches and you rotate through your collection and you're looking at your collection one day deciding which one you're going to wear and you see your automatic watch is almost run down, you might wind it. In my opinion, more is better as long as it doesn't become an encumbrance, and I like the fact that these watches are subtly complicated. Often linked noting that it is quartz regulated. The timing instrument is quartz, the regulating instrument is the governing wheel, and it is a very, very, very cool mechanical ballet. Kevin S. Tim, thoughts on the Lake Sua SLGA007? Okay, this is a watch, a limited edition piece that actually came out last year. It's now part of the EVO 9 collection alongside the 009. It is a blue dial that has a hammered appearance. I happen to like it better than the white Birch Spring Drive just because to me it's more colorful. It has elements of red and blue and gold on its dial, and I think that's more aesthetically pleasing than the rather frigid white Birch, which is a cool piece, but it just doesn't appeal to me. I like color. I'm wearing green, I'm wearing blue, I've got my red Corvette behind me. You already sort of know what I think. And that one's a 2021 piece limited edition. Daniel B saying, folks, I don't get Grand Seiko. Okay, well, learn a little bit about it. You might like what you see. And you've got your options. Mechanical, quartz, or spring drive. Rolex doesn't give you that many movement options. And they make both automatic and manual wind. Rocker 613. Tim, thoughts on Arnold & Son? Are they done since selling to Citizen? Far from it. Citizen gave them the money and the long-term stability to do what they want to do, which is why they still make quirky watches and they've never exploited mainstream tastes, which is why their watches don't look anything like integrated bracelet steel sports watches or Rolexes or even Pateks or FP Journes. They make beautifully hand-finished watches and only 700 of them per year. They are a full integrated manufacturer out of La Chaux-de-Fonds, and if you want to get super boutique with Arnold & Son, get Angelus. Most of them have tourbillon. They are high horology and they only make 70 of those per year. What else is going on? Love Watches USA, better late than never. And then Edward Ledden saying, I would probably look at Japanese independence instead. You've got many options. Consider Minase, which has a lot of the best qualities of Grand Seiko, but at lower volume, and they are a little bit more idiosyncratic. We've got Lloyd Sharma joining us early in the morning from Sydney. All right, viewer wrist shots. Richard, you're in the box. Now you're on the screen. Richard C. of South Florida showcases the most desirable of the current Rolex Sky Dwellers, a GMT, an annual calendar, and the Jubilee bracelet. Jeffrey C. sports a Rolex Submariner on an Oris strap with a Lego Aston Martin James Bond DB5 in the background. I love it. Anthony M. of San Francisco and his Glasuta Original Senator Observer watch the sun during golden hour by the bay. Dan V. of Milwaukee in the American Midwest wears his Gerard Perego Laureato Absolute TI 230 from last year on a frosty day. Harry G. impresses with graphics on his wrist and the Bulgari Octo Finissimo automatic in stainless steel. Guys, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your pieces on these pixels. What's going on here? Abdul saying the options have never been bigger than they are right now. That is true. You have so many options. Between big brands, medium brands, independents, you will find the watch you want. And look, unless you've absolutely got to have the watch, I recommend no one ever pay over list for a watch, even if it's from us, because I think you'll find another watch box or OEM watch that's better value pre-owned, and depreciation is still a thing for most watches. Appreciation and values that rise, that's still relatively rare. Open your mind to other brands and models. You're going to find a lot of well-priced options. And then we have Asha Alex saying, I need a GS Spring Drive, just don't know which. I'm a big fan of the Skyflake, but look around. There are a lot of small runs, including Japanese domestic market pieces that are really cool, but don't circulate too often. Dylan Lamb was thinking the other day, when could we see a Platinum Submariner or GMT? I say that if we're going to find a Platinum Submariner in the collection, it's going to be towards the end of the current generation, and it'll be something designed to extend the life of the current generation. Think 2013 Platona, the Platinum Daytona, and you get the same basic idea. In terms of GMTs, again, towards the end of the run of this reference, we might see that. Keep in mind that a series production Platinum GMT or Submariner would be a first ever, so that would be a major milestone, and they'd want to make it for a few years before curtailing it. Okay, Rolex Oysterquartz date. We were talking about Rolex, now let's talk about Rolex. This Rolex is not in platinum, but it is the platinum standard for luxury quartz. Launched in 1977, the Oysterquartz Date is the definitive quartz Rolex and destined to be rare because over about a quarter century into the early 2000s, maybe late 90s, they stopped cataloging it in the early 2000s. But they only built 25,000 Oysterquartz watches, most of which were the cheaper and less complex Datejust, not the more expensive gold or white gold Oysterquartz day dates. This is incredibly scarce. What other Rolex watch can you think of that's only made in about 1,000 pieces per year, of which most are going to be the junior model? This is the senior model. So we're talking maybe by the end an average of hundreds of pieces per year. All reference 19,000, that's the 19,019 or the 19,018 were built in precious metal, gold or white gold. Rolex Caliber 5055 was a fully optioned Cadillac of a movement with every imaginable refinement you could pack into quartz in the 70s, including a COSC quartz chronometer certification, thermocompensated quartz timing so temperature high and low doesn't alter its ability to keep time precisely, a manual quartz drift trimmer acknowledging that quartz crystals will age over time and giving the watchmaker a way internally and natively to compensate for that over the decades this watch will be in service. And an actual Swiss lever mechanical escapement, because that was Rolex's solution for an absolutely precise locking and unlocking of the seconds hand so it would always align with the indices on the dial. It has a full Swiss lever internally, albeit powered by a stepper motor rather than a mechanical drive system. But the result is that the watch ticks loudly, and it's a 1 hertz tick, and it's very distinct with these Oyster quartzes. They do have their own heartbeats, and they have a life to them. Some folks say that quartz doesn't have enough life, enough sound, enough animus. Well, in this watch, problem solved. Also, unlike the Beta 21, the 5055 Oysterquartz Date 8 movement was an in-house effort by Rolex, and the 11-jewel caliber was designed to be maintained, tuned, and upgraded over time by Rolex watchmakers. As a result, we will occasionally see 1977 and 1978 Oysterquartz watches here at Watchbox that are still on their original movements and still functioning as intended. So these were designed to last the life not just of the owner, but of the watch, cognizant of the fact that a Rolex is an heirloom and designed to be handed down through the generations. This Rolex was built for the long haul. I should also mention that watchmakers continue to service these at all global Rolex service centers, and they are still capable of keeping time as precisely as 5 seconds per month. That's better even than Grand Seiko's 10-second Spring Drive, and far better than the quartz standard today in the modern era in 2022 of 15 seconds per month. Now here's the other thing that's interesting, a fascinating postscript to the story of the Oysterquartz. According to experts in Rolex who I've consulted, the 1970 1,000-piece limited edition Rolex Beta 21, the model 5100, was actually designed by Gerard Perego, and that this integrated bracelet was actually his warm-up for watches like the 1972 Royal Oak or the 1976 Nautilus or Jumbo Ingenieur. This watch was really the model that spawned the entire era of Gerard Gmt integrated bracelet watches. And while it wasn't a sports watch, it had the large tonneau-shaped presence of a sports watch. And if you consider all of the other watches that emulated the Gmtas, watches like the Gerard Perego Laureato and the Vacheron 222, to say nothing of all the watches today that emulate Gmt designs of the 70s, this was the beginning of that. And Gerard Gmt himself later remarked during interviews that his design, as he called it, for Rolex, remained in production in the modern era, heavily suggesting that he believed the Oysterquartz, which came out in 1977, to be a continuation of his reference 5100 design. As a result, the Rolex Oysterquartz is pretty much as close as you're ever going to get to a Gerard Gmt designed Rolex. That is just like blue chip synergy. And if the market ever figures that out, goodbye affordable Oysterquartz. Okay guys, what's going on in the box? Captain Zed, Tim, I should thank you for convincing me to purchase the FP Journe Elegant 48 in 2016. Not only did you buy a great watch and do well on it financially, but your watch is going to be featured in today's show. What else is going on? We have Enrique Casiano. GS undervalues the precision of its movements. I've never seen a GS that loses or gains more than 2 seconds per month. We've got Jesus Valdez joining in from Phoenix in Arizona in the United States. And we've got Justin D saying, my Oysterquartz is my birth year watch. We've got Jang F from, Jang P from Santiago, Chile. And then Marco F asking, is Tim wearing a Z Blue Milgauss yet? No. I figured that the next watch I buy has to be a Deville. I was on board long before Watchbox was on board, and I kind of feel like that acquisition was my baby. As a result, I have to put my money where my mouth is and ultimately where my wrist is. As much as I love the Z Blue, and you will hear about that on an upcoming episode of Around the Crown, my next acquisition has to be Deville. And then right here we have Pontiff checking in from Minneapolis, Minnesota, rather than Rome, but it's all good. I like the Midwest. And then we've got Omarion AL. Tim, is it true that Rolex designed the original Panerai submersible for the Italian Marine? The original Panerai combat watches, like the 3646, were made by Rolex using an Oyster case and an Oyster crown and a Rolex modified Côte d'Ivoire pocket watch movement. The modifications were then made in Italy by Panerai, such as the application of their signature lume and the fabrication of the dial. But it's absolutely true that Rolex principally fabricated the original Panerai combat watches. That is true. Though by the 1950s, that was less true, as they came up with different case sealing and Angelus replaced Rolex Côte d'Ivoire as the power. We have Rocker 613 saying, I bought a DB25 recently. Yes, I love that. Wear it in good health. You chose well. And Abdul asking, DB Digital. I would love to own the DB Digital, the DBD as it's called. It's a very rare watch from 2006. But I have a feeling that if we get one, that it's now worth so much, we're probably going to sell it rather than give me the employee pricing. And in terms of the DB28 Digital, I think it's just too big for me at 45 millimeters. What I'm trying to get them to do is make me the DB27 Polo, which was a 5-day power reserve digital watch with a 5,000 Vickers coating on a 1,200 Vickers steel case with the floating lugs. It's the best of everything from Deville. All right, Spencer Chapman, would a modern Rolex Oysterquartz attract the flexors and subsequently make the autos more available? I don't think so, because even if Rolex provided some more watches from a new model line at the margins, you've got to remember that Rolex could probably make 2 or even 3 times as many watches as it's making now, which means, I don't know, potentially like 2,700,000 watches, and we'd still be paying the same prices. Such is the overabundance of demand relative to supply. So just adding another Oysterquartz model line and making, who knows, like 10,000, 15,000 of those a year, I don't think it would change anything about the desirability or the price of the steel models. And then Tori in New York City saying, I was just at our Philly store. Thank you for visiting us. As Mario joins in from Costa Rica in Central America. Guys, thanks for joining in. All right, let's see what's up right now. Viewers Chats number 3, mine, well, I should say, My requests, your answers. Let's see your watch in my box. Matthias L. is on the beach in Chile with his spectacular white gold Rolex Daytona. Looking good. That's the blue dial from 2016. Dylan L. supports the show as always with his well-known Rolex Air King in soft light. Charles A. and his Seiko SKX are on a ski expedition at altitude in Colorado, USA. Tom B. and his Cartier Tank Centre. The Centre on the town on New York City's Fifth Avenue. Warren G. combines his Grand Seiko Skyflake with a lovely contrasting stitch brown leather strap. Send your shouts to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com. Okay, Oysterquartz, Spring Drive, you probably saw those coming. But did you see the 2016 Piaget Emperador Cousin XL 700P? I bet you didn't. You might have seen it, and it was a blinker you'll miss it type of debut back in 2016. Preamble. Japan is known for excellence in cultural appropriation. It didn't invent the car or mass production of cars, but it makes great cars, and it has a dominant auto industry. Japan didn't invent rock, blues, or jazz, but it makes great guitars. Just ask Steve Vai. Japan didn't invent animation, but Japan is pretty much Pixar's only real rival on that front. See where I'm going with this? Often it's true in watchmaking as well. We've all heard the stories of the Seiko Micro Artist Studio sending its watchmakers and its finisseurs to study in the Vallée du Jeu with Philippe Dufour and observe best practices in the region. It's also well known that European Zalitz machine polishing has been adapted and rebranded in Japan as Zaratsu polish, among other terms. But 2016 witnessed a stunning reversal as Switzerland nakedly borrowed Seiko's unique Spring Drive concept to create the hybrid quartz mechanical Emperador Cousin XL. Now, this was officially a 118-piece limited edition in white gold to mark the 40th anniversary of Piaget's first in-house quartz caliber, the ultra-thin 7P of 1976. But it was crystal clear that this was exactly the same thing Seiko had been doing since 1999. 2005 with automatic. Check it out. A regulating wheel that creates a induced current that wakes up a quartz oscillator that then breaks the regulating wheel, which drives the drivetrain. All of it animated by a mechanically winding micro rotor automatic system and a mainspring barrel with a 42-hour power reserve. The only difference here, we had a wheel that made 5.33 rotations per second. Okay, big deal. But it's impressive because Piaget, which is one of the backbench Richemont brands and one mostly known for jewelry and ladies' watches, became the only Swiss manufacturer to successfully clone and market Seiko Spring Drive. Think about all the monsters of Swiss engineering that failed to get this far. ETA, Audemars Piguet Renault et Papy, Patek Philippe, Jaeger-LeCoultre, Rolex. None of them accomplished this. This is a big deal for Piaget. It's as though nobody in Switzerland had the idea. Or is it? Because there is, after all, a US patent dating to 1976, and it refers to prior art European applications from as early as 1972. So I guess nothing is truly new in the world of watches, and even Seiko may have borrowed the idea from elsewhere. But make no mistake, the Emperador Cousin is a really, really cool watch. Idea and execution are two different things. When I was in high school, I had the idea for cloud computing. I'm not a cloud computing billionaire, Amazon. So execution matters, and Seiko got there first. But this deserves a lot of credit for doing the impossible on a shoestring budget in a really small manufacturer. It's 46.5 millimeters, but the cushion case doesn't wear nearly that large. The micro rotor winder for the Piaget drive is right on the dial side too, along with the governing wheel, which makes the watch a lot more interesting to look at than the Grand Seiko and Seiko Spring Drives. There's a ton of traditional mechanical watchmaking and manual fine finishing to enjoy here. Remember, most Seiko Spring Drive watches and Grand Seiko Spring Drive watches are machine executed, and there's a power reserve indicator on the back, so you get an extra complication. Piaget claimed accuracy of 1 second per day, and no fewer than 10 patent applications, and they threw some firepower at it too, because Richemont movement czar Eric Klein, who almost single-handedly made Panerai a manufacturer in the 2000s, was deeply involved in the Piaget project. It was pre-selected for the 2010 GPHG under the mechanical exception category, and then it vanished. It just disappeared. Go ahead, try to find one, new or used. I don't know why. Did it fail to function properly? Were they not able to get it to run reliably or run accurately enough that they could put a warranty on it? Did Seiko threaten a lawsuit? Nobody knows what happened to this watch, but I can tell you that I've only ever seen the watch at SIHH, and then only once, the year it came out. This watch remains one of the great modern mysteries in the luxury watch space, and to this day, I have no idea how the story ended. So this particular entry in today's show ends with an ellipse, ... hopefully to be continued. What's going on? We've got Wheatzer's Wood Shop. Hello from Oak Harbor, Washington on Whidbey Island. I got a friend who lives up in Bellingham, and he's a Seattle fireman, so I got some friends in that neck of the woods. Then we have Jane Murray asking, hi Tim, is Panerai on the way back? Feels like it. I don't think Panerai will ever be back to the status it had in the early 2000s when it was just beyond cool, because so many people bought and wore Panerai unsponsored, and for the most part it was the Panerai collectors fraternity that propelled interest in the watches, and they were making thousands, not tens of thousands. These days Panerai is shooting for 100,000 watches a year, and I just don't think it will ever be what it was. Will it be a nice in-house Richemont alternative to JLC and IWC? Probably, but I don't think it'll ever have the exclusivity or the it factor that it had back when the watches were relatively inexpensive, but relatively hard to find. Okay, Mike Findlow, Tim, thoughts on the IWC Time Zoner series? Those watches are really big, and while they're technically cool, it is a system invented ages ago for a client by Andreas Streller, which is cool because you can get an Andreas Streller invention in an IWC. The problem is the time zoners are gigantic timepieces, and unless you have a gigantic wrist, you're going to have trouble wearing them. Dr. TikTok, I keep going back and forth for a Calatrava, 5196R or the new 6119R. I love the idea of a display case back on the 6119, but is that and the movement worth the price compared to the 5196? Look, if you love rose gold and you love movements, get the 6119. But I would say that if you're going to be open to other metals, consider the 5196 in platinum. It is the most beautiful manual wind time-only watch Patek makes. It's a good size at 37 millimeters. It's super slim at about 7.3, 7.5 millimeters. It is the Calatrava. And it is much more attractive, at least to my eye, both of dial and case, than the 196R. That said, if you want to enjoy the watch holistically and you have any preference for a more advanced, longer-legged, and better-looking movement, go for the 6119. I think it's a really good-looking watch, and I think you'll be very satisfied. What else is going on? Ooh, love from Syosset. Let me jump back in the comments. Who is that? The Real 2 Fly. Still want to see that Pistachio Breitling review. When I get one, I will review it. I'm at the mercy of our inventory. That was the coolest new Breitling of the last decade for me. So rest assured, when it lands, it'll appear here. Okay. Viewer wrist shots number 4. JC celebrates Christmas on Long Island with his Omega Speedmaster, or Seamaster Diver 300 meter. My apologies, although the original Speedmaster, I should say, was part of the Seamaster collection. But this is the Diver 300 meter, and I am a Long Islander, so I'm happy to see that shot. Edward L. of Sweden pays a visit to Omega's Budapest store to try this Speedmaster Moonphase. Looking good. It is a bit big for you, though. JCS shares the rare Omega Deville GMT on its spectacular full brick bracelet. Jacob O. of Montana, USA enjoys a day outside with his Omega Seamaster Diver 300 meter white ceramic dial. And Chris L. of the UK shares his father and son pair of Omega Seamaster Planet Oceans. We just did a full wrist shot Omega segment. May there be many more. Okay, FP Journe Elegant 48. If anyone at Watchbox can credibly claim to have been a long-term Journe skeptic, it's this guy. I'm just not really into it. In almost every instance where a Journe model plays in a given segment, there's another watch in that segment that I'd rather have. Lang und Tyne Friedrich III. Gorgeous from Lang und Tyne. I'd rather have that than a Chronomètre Bleu, and for a fraction of the price, as you can get that watch in steel for under 30 grand. Unbelievable? Believe it. But one FP Journe is unlike anything else on the market in its segment, and that is the Elegant 48 by FP Journe. Emphasis on by FP Journe. First, the bad news. It's not counted as part of Journe's often advertised 900-odd production limit per year. Journe initially targeted 1,500 Elegant sales per year, and my understanding is there was a willingness to go beyond that if the market would accommodate and provide the demand. And if you've seen the pre-owned prices of these things lately, you realize that the demand struck long ago. So this is not part of Journe's 900-piece mechanical watch production limit. They're making a lot more. And the movement itself is heavily specified and broadly conceived by Montre Journe, which is the watch brand of FP Journe, but the actual sourcing of specialized electronic components has always been external for this watch. All that said, I'd rather have the Elegant than any other FP Journe sports watch, and for that matter, possibly any other Journe watch. And here's why. First, there's the subversiveness of it. If you were to conceive the worst possible pitch to a male watch collector, you would say, dude, guess what I have for you? I've converted a ladies' non-round quartz watch for you. I made the case bigger and I removed the diamonds. Otherwise, it's exactly the same thing. And recent versions of the 48 have even added the diamonds back for those who want them. That should have been a ready-made bomb on the luxury watch market. And initially, dudes were reticent because back in 2017, Montre Journe would give this watch away as a special gift to top customers. No longer. It became a blockbuster. The subversiveness of it, the way it runs against the grain of watch collector prejudice, endears it to me. And it's the only Journe watch, including sports watches, that can go for a swim. The mechanical line sport watches have push-down crowns with 30-meter water resistance. None of them can be submerged for swimming. But the Elegant, though openly rated to 30 meters, is quietly tested to 50 meters and beyond at the Journe factory. And in communication with folks from the brand, they've told me that it is safe for swimming, which is more than you can say of some of the six-figure platinum line sport watches that are more familiar to Journe collectors. This is the only one you should take swimming if you're buying a sporting Journe. Plus, the lume is insane. The entire dial is a disc of lume that keeps this watch legible like a sports watch should be. And I should mention, it's a tonneau case that wears beautifully on my tiny wrist. It's only 7.7 millimeters thick in titanium, feather light, and 48 millimeters, again, is the lug to lug, not the width. The width is about 37.5 to 39.5, which means it wears compact, and even a small wrist is welcome to play. The movement is special. Even by Quartz standards, you have to admit, this is endearing and lovable and warm. It brings a smile to your face. It uses rose gold, it looks good, and it actually merits a sapphire display case back. Battery life is spectacular. 8 to 10 years on the wrist. 18 years is the shelf life if you're not wearing it regularly. Sleep mode puts the watch to sleep after 35 inactive minutes. And a microprocessor remembers the time, so when you pick it up, there's a little eccentric mass, that's the hole in the dial, it's a little rocker, that wakes up the watch, and the motors will turn clockwise or counterclockwise, whichever is shorter, to reach the current time and minimize the energy expended. It is genuinely brilliant, and again, unlike every other Journe watch, there's not an alternative from some other brand that I'd rather have. Okay, we close with one of the pioneers of quartz, Gerard Perego, which created its own quartz calibers back in the 1970s It was originally part of Beta 21, but was unsatisfied by that bulky movement, and it designed its own. With Caliber 350, it helped to set the modern quartz oscillation standard of 32,768 hertz, all of which is to say GP is one of the original gangsters when it comes to quartz, and they revisited that pioneering status in 2010 to mark 40 years of quartz and 35 years of the Laureato. GP launched reference 8188. Can we go full screen with that? Because this thing is just downright beautiful. A watch ahead of its time, definitely in the look and the feel. 42.6 millimeters, a steel bracelet, integrated sports watch with a 2-die-4 slate blue hobnail dial with silver, white, and red accents, and a 40-piece limited edition that is truly limited. The manufacturer caliber 13500 was decorated to be gorgeous underneath a rare display caseback for a quartz, and you can see even the dial side, which was mostly hidden under the dial itself, was decorated with perlage and satination. The Laureato 8188 is almost impossible to find. I have never seen one used, but allegedly it was such a difficult watch to market and sell that unsold examples remained in dealer cases into the 2016, 2018 model years, which is to say that if you find one today, you might get a screaming deal. There's little sale history, little auction history, and precious little to inflate the price you might pay. But just know this, if you find it, you've got an almost undiscovered gem. Buy it, because you'll never find another. Rumors of a GP casquette, reference 9931 LED quartz revival, are rife. That was their only watch from this past year, and it's supposed to precede a regular production version in carbon fiber, gold, or steel. But if you want a quartz Nautilus killer, keep your eyes peeled for that rare 35th anniversary Laureato with the 40th anniversary quartz movement. Guys, send your wrist shots to mondaymailbag@thewatchbox.com to see your wrist on my list on the show. Thank you to Sean, always operating the switcher, making the magic happen with the photos. Until then, time out, Tim out, and thanks for logging on.